Hi guys, welcome to the school film. Alright, so in this school film, we want to look at some network command tools that comes in handy based on the use case or scenario that is presented to us when we are doing our work as developers. So if you haven't watched the episode or you haven't checked out the first video for this series, you can check the comment section, the description section for the link to that video. You should see it also on your screen too. Alright, so let's go straight into why we need some network command tools to do our work. And the story is as such. You are working as a developer, you have a software that you want to, that software is serving a purpose, or there are requirements for the software that's coming from a client or coming from the business. So you're on a project and you have dependencies. The software has dependencies. What am I trying to say? For instance, you are building a payment application. That payment application you are building is for the first phase is being considered fully local payment. In other words, we want to circulate only local payment and terminate on local service. But here's a case whereby we move to another phase, and that phase to run to now go international. We want to focus on international payments as well. International payments or services that have international payments, we do not have that platform. We do not have that service because there are service providers based on the market we want to reach or based on the customer target group we want to reach. Service providers or entities have created services to cater for that. So all we do need is just their API to facilitate that transaction or facilitate that processing or terminate that process in that particular geographical region we want to enter to. So if, for instance, I take my country where I am located, Ghana, and I build an app, or there are apps that help people to make payments. If now I want to consider payment or transfers to China, I do not have China customers on my platform due to international law, business, and due to economy, due to other factors. I do not have a China platform on my service. So what do? I have to have a partner, or have to have there has to be a service provider there that will come into an understanding with me so that I can have an access to those servers and those customers I want to reach. So if I'm talking about money transfer, and there's a money transfer API that is coming from the China and the Chinese people, why not? Why do not have to just integrate that dependency into my application that I'm doing? So that's just the whole idea, that there are two separate entities. I am entity A, I work in one jurisdiction, work in one geography, and I want to touch other geographies, other people, other customers, but I do not have access to the customer because when I set up the business or set up the company, I didn't set it up for those customers. I set it up in the light of my vision and my mission. So if that's the case, if I want to touch those customers that I do not have access to, then I have to work or partner with those customers that service provider has access to. So it's as simple as that. That's the whole idea about the network command tools. Now we're going to go as to why we need these network command tools. So in this case is establishing connectivity. How do we establish connectivity between two separate entities? And that's with the work of networking. We're going to delve into networks, TCP, IPs, IP addresses, and now we want to look at the actual practical when it comes to reading some of the network command tools that help us to our work. So that's the idea. So we've talked with our partner, connectivity has established. We are now establishing connectivity. They're done with the business side of it. Now let the technology to take over. So they've signed the business, they've done the ads, they've gone to the news, and so maybe company A partners with company B to reach more customers for the unbanked sector, or to reach more customers in sectors that were unreachable. So it's that partnership that they don't bring. Now technology, let's get that done for them. Technology, let's get that done for them. So we'll run through some of the network command tools, and I'm sure as and when we experience more use cases, we'll find out more command line tools, or even go deeper into some of the command line tools we look at into here. So I hope the use case is quite clear. That's just the story. Now after every story we have to have, or after every problem there has to be a solution. So now let's get our hands dirty. So what we are going to do in this code folder, first of all, I'm going to launch a software called Terminus. Terminus is an emulator, terminal emulator. So the reason I'm doing this is that, let's have this understanding. As a developer, I'm working on my local host. You understand? I'm operating from my local host. This is my development machine. This is what I'm operating from. If I'm also working in the company, I'm still working on my local host. So I need to have access to those networks that will help me to reach those services that have been made available by those partners in their service. So there has to be a way, because I'm a local host, and then I don't think the business or technology will set up a private tunnel all the way to my personal device. I don't think it works like that, because I'm not the only developer there. There are other developers working. So if other developers are working, then there has to be a particular server that gives all of us access to those APIs that we need to do our work. So we are now getting to the concept of management servers, jump servers, and remote servers. So the Chinese partner is a remote server. There's no problem about that. He's a remote server, and I, as a developer, I can't work on my local host. No, because I'm done with my source code, but I need to do the integration to my local host too. So if I'm doing that integration, I have to be able to test the service somewhere. So if I'm going to test the service somewhere, then I need to have access to that service. I need to go into a particular server that gives me that access. So in this case, or with this understanding, we are going to launch Terminus, which is an emulator, and do a remote desktop connection and SSH connection to the server that gives me access to those platforms. So in other words, I want to go into a jump server, I want to go into a management server. So the jump server was when I hop onto that server, I get connectivity. A management server, if I go into that server, probably on that server I'll have connectivity to that API or service I want. So I have some number of servers here, because I have some VMs running on my laptop. But what we do is that we'll create one so we understand what we are doing. So first thing first is that let's go to the jump server. So we're going to create a connection to the jump server. So we'll say new host. Then we do new host. We type the IP address of the server that will give us access to the partner, or to those servers that have the application. Someone said, why isn't this service on the internet? Well, due to one or two reasons. Probably that service is not a public service that needs to be accessible on the internet due to business reasons. But it could be that it's available on some private servers on their machines, and we establish some form of connectivity to get there. Later on, we look at VPNs and firewalls and understand some of these things. So the first thing is that I want to go to my jump server. So my jump server is .190, and then I'll give it a username. I know the username, it's app user, and I'll add the password to it. And then I can even just give this a label as jump server. Right, so jump server. Right, then let's do connect. That's beautiful. Alright, so now I'm not in my jump server. So jump server, I should be able to connect or reach my partner's API and start doing my work. If I'm on my local host, for understanding of what we are going to do, when I'm on my local host and I'm done with my work, when I'm done, probably I'll test the service on the server that has the server that has that we all do our deployment on. So probably it's an app server. I'll test it on the app server. But on my local host, I do not have access. You have to understand that because there's no connectivity that's been established between I and the partners API sitting somewhere in China. It hasn't been done. If it was available, it would be on the internet. So for instance, if I wanted to do another, let's look at services, some services that are on the internet that we can all use because of the requirements that are being drawn for it. So example is if you want to use an API by Paystack, you want to use an API by Stripe. Those APIs are on the internet. When I say they're on the internet, what I'm trying to say is that they've been designed or they've been considered for everybody to have access to. So they are open APIs. They are available to everybody to use. But if there's a scenario whereby there are some APIs that, due to one or two business reasons, it's not accessible to everybody, you have to go through some of these things I'm talking about, like connectivity has to be established between you and partner, and there are reasons to it. So usually there are reasons to it. So one API design can have several phases or several things to it. So if I go to something like Stripe API, Stripe, I don't think anybody has that domain besides Stripe. So here's in financial infrastructure. So when you go to developers, so it says getting started, app integrations, full API reference, API status. So this is available on the internet, and that's because I'm going through my router to reach them, and that's perfect. But what the API I want to access now is not available on the internet because a developer there has developed it and he has put it on their server there. He hasn't made it available on the internet. He hasn't deployed it or published it or released it on the internet for us to use. So we have to go through something like this. So we have left our local host and we are now inside our jump server. So it's our jump server that is going to give us that access to the API that we want to do our work. Nice. So go full screen. Right, so this makes sense now. So this way here, this is our remote server. This is our local host. If you want to be sure, now let's start using some of the tools. If you want to be sure where you are or who you are or what server you are, you can just use this command. So for our local host, let's confirm our local host. So if I go to local host, just open command prompt and I type host name, it tells me the name of the host where I am located. So this is just the name of the host. And if I go ahead and do ipconfig, basically ipconfig, you can get to know the IP address of the device, that the IP address assigned to that device. And that's just the beginning of things. So just host name. So you can have host name at the back of your memory. We started gradually. So host name. So let's go back into our jump server. You say host name. So host name says app server. Alright, so because for demo purposes, what I've done is that I have some number of VMs. Those VMs, some of them are going to be remote service, some are going to be jump service or app service. But then for just demo purposes. So if I click on my VM box or my virtual box manager here, I just want to show you the list of servers that I have virtualized or created for my personal machine. But we've looked at virtual machines. If you haven't watched virtual machines too, please check out the virtual machines video. I'll also drop a link to that video too as well. Yeah. Okay, so as this gets ready, let's go straight. So server found, then let's look at the server found. So the number of servers, and then this is the remote server that I'm saying is in China, but it's located on my device. But the understanding has to be there. So on another host device or another device that will be done by someone, another device that's being used by someone or be provisioned by someone, another person or another IT person there, definitely going to be a remote server to us. Alright, so now okay. So let's go ahead, and the first thing is that we know the API that we want to use For now, it's not HTTPS. We look at HTTPS later. The API I want to use will definitely have a domain name. So let's say we are going to api.payments.com, and we go to api.payments.com. We have an API. We have a version one of that API. And what we want to do is processing. We want to use a processing API. So processing API, we want to do what kind of processing? We want to do card transfers. So what that's one API. So that's a service that has been provided to us. So there are some card services, or there are some services that are in the China platform we do not have access to. So we want to go to the Chinese service and do that work. So in doing that work, going through an API, and that API that is located on the endpoint at card transfers. And the reason is that they have onboarded customers for that product service that they are selling to them. Customers are using it. So a good example is that, from what I know, most Chinese are all found on the WeChat platform. So if we want to have access to WeChat, as we want to have access to the Chinese individuals, or the individuals in China, the best way we say that we need to have access to the WeChat API that grants us access to person's data for the particular application that we are building. So they have access, they've created the platform, and they've onboarded their customers on it. So they are users on that platform. They've all been registered on that platform, and they are on their infrastructure. Alright, so we're okay with that. So this is the API we want to see, we want to access. So the first thing is that we have our API. I'm in Ghana, or I'm in South Africa. How do I know that connectivity has been established between my service from the jump server, or the server that gives me access to the remote server? And the first in our Swiss knife suit is going to be ping. Alright, ping is one way of you checking if there's connectivity between your host and the Chinese. That's the first thing we have to do. So the first thing is that we check ping. And when we have been able to ping and it's successful, then we say that alright, then we are good to go. If the ping is not successful, then we find out why ping is not successful. It's the ifconfig. So we have our IP address. So this is our IP address, or this is the IP address that has been assigned to this jump server. So it's at .190. We've already understood subnet max, and we've understood broadcast a little bit about it in our IP session. So we know this is no longer straight weird to us again. It's understandable. So we know that it's a class C IP, and then we know the number of the length of the network ID, and it tells us the number of hosts and all other details. Okay, so we found our IP, and we know that our app server. So the first thing that we talked about is that let's ping the IP address we want to go to. So pinging the IP address, partners didn't send the IP address to us, probably they put everything to us like this. You could see that api.payment.php.com, you go to API, go to version 1, and then go to processing, and go to card transfers. So this is what we do. This is the endpoint they just give it to us. If you want to perform that work that you want us to do, come here. So the API is this, the API. So how do we test that connectivity? Because from what we know, test connectivity between IP addresses. We want to be sure of the IP address first. So one best way is that if you do a ping to Google, it can resolve to find out the IP address for you. So that means this jump server has access to google.com, so you can reach google.com. But if not, that's not the case, then one of the tools you can use is nslookup. So nslookup is a tool that will try to tell you, then give you the IP address behind that name. So do nslookup of google.com. It will give you the IP address behind the google.com. So the IP address behind the google.com is this IP address, correct? And it tallies with the same of ping. So you just need to have this in your mind. So probably you will want to do an nslookup to find out the IP. If it doesn't work due to reasons about DNS and host files and all other things, the other ways of checking. So if partner doesn't give you the IP address, this is just one way. So if you do an nslookup and you don't get the IP address, you try doing the ping to the domain shared with you. If the ping to the domain doesn't work, then you want to search for that IP. If it's not available on the DNS because you've done a DNS query, I don't want to go too much. You've checked the host file, it's not there, like nothing shows, then there's a big issue. So that's not your work as a developer, or that's not our work as developers. I wouldn't do that. Alright, so we've looked at ping and we've made mention of nslookup. So first thing that let's ping our IP. So we know the IP address is 192.168.0.131. So that's the IP address that has that's the remote server that has our software or our service that we want to use or consume. So when we do a ping first, we are receiving packets from the server, which tells you that yes, the service is what? Up. The server is up, not the service. The server is up. So the server is up. So that means connectivity has been established between this host and the remote server, which is very good. So we are at thumbs up, we are fine, we are okay. There's connectivity. Okay, there's a downside now too. It could be that the server is up, but the application itself is not up. What do I mean? If I go to my local host, for instance, this is my local host. I have, as a local host machine, I have so many applications that could be installed on my local host. One of the things that could be installed on my local host is when I come to Windows program files, Apache, Tomcat, web apps. So this on my local host. I have a number of applications. I have a server on this machine. So I have one application, I have another application, cloud service. So all these are installed on local host, but they could be installed but they are not on. So now the next thing is I have to test if the service is actually on. Has it been switched on? That's what I'm going to test, because I want to be sure I can reach the server. Connectivity has been established, but is that application that I want to use, is it on? If it's not on, then I have to take other measures. We are gradually getting there. So what we can do now is that we can select the telnet, right? Telnet to 192.168.131. Application, for you to reach that particular application, it has to be on the port. So you built an application and you installed it or you set it up or you defined it on a port, and that port is the only port that has what? The application. So you go to that port. So that on this port you find the processing API, and partner will give that to you. If no partner will give that to you, connectivity will be established between you and partner to reach that. So it's not really your issue, but it's about you knowing some of these things. Yeah. So if you are doing a telnet and since connection refused, then I ask myself, is it that the application is not up, or is it from my end, or is from partner's end? And the reason is that it's saying connection refused. Connection refused is ambiguous. It doesn't say anything. It's just saying connection refused. Is that the application is up and it's on a remote server, it's on a Chinese server. You are not in China. So how do you further on to back and analyze and find what the actual problem is? So look at ping, look at telnet now too. Alright, another tool that comes in handy is traceroute. Most of the time, ping and traceroute put them hand in hand. Traceroute is when you want to actually see if connectivity has been established. So I should have mentioned traceroute ping back because I want us to follow an order. That's why I brought telnet. So now we understand what telnet does. Now traceroute is one of the tools. For instance, I want to see if my API, my app server can reach Google service. So let's do a traceroute to google.com, and then it tells me all the routers that it has passed through to actually terminate on Google server. That's what a ping actually means. So a traceroute actually means, traceroute means that trace the route of all the packets or the data from A to B through the routers. So more of packets. You want to see how the traffic is being moved or how those packets are being moved. So we looked at it and that tells you that that's perfect. There's actually a route to those words. There's a route that's been defined. You can actually see that it has been able to reach the Google servers because there's a route that's been defined. If there was no route and do a trace route to, let's say, ghgh.com, I don't think there's a server to this. Okay. Probably there's a domain to it which I'm not aware of. Right, so it is where it will terminate. Let's see if it will terminate on the last hop. It has a number of hops, 30 hops. So there is nothing at the last hop, it's empty. So it's not a valid IP address. Alright, so let me be sure. Let's do this again. Let's do trace route. And let's say let's give something random. Alright, this shouldn't .com. Let's go again. It's complaining. Let's change this a little. Right, so this is much better. It couldn't handle command line. I think the arcs are too much. Let's reduce this one. Let's do GH1234. It says name or service is not known. Right, that's perfect, which means that there's no route to this. So this one is okay, it was quite valid. It means that it exists somewhere. But then it seems this one doesn't exist at all. But it couldn't terminate. It came out to the last 30. So later we could check and find out, but that's not the purpose of this question. So let's do another trace route. Let's do a trace route to myself. YouTube.com. This too is good, but this is couldn't handle host. You cannot resolve it. So this is just a little bit of trace route. When there's a path defined, it actually move to that path and terminate. Right? There's no path defined. So that's just for you to do that. If you go ahead and do a ping, you can also go ahead and do a trace route. And if you are not, if connectivity has been established, you want to go ahead and do a telnet. Alright, so we are good with that. So we saw that when we did a telnet to 192.131 at that port, so this other port. This connection refused, so we have to find out what the issue is. Most of the time, when you see something like connection refused, you probably think firewall or other stuff. Like it turns out that even the firewall that you want to use, the firewall is not even up or it hasn't been enabled. So if that's the case, how do you find out what the issue is? Because you are getting connection refused. So it says status is inactive. That means the firewall is actually not, it hasn't been enabled. There's no firewall. It's inactive. So connection reviews is also ambiguous. So there has to be another way of rechecking what the issue is. So let's now look at tcpdump. tcpdump is a tool that I've come to love because with tcpdump you're actually trying to find out if your packets are either going or coming. If I do a TCP dump, I'm expecting packets to come from the server, and packets don't come, which means that there's a problem. What do I mean by that? It could be that yes, you can establish connectivity, that's fine with the data, but I'm trying to do a TCP dump to see if the server will respond to me with some packets on a port that I'll make mention of. Let's just get our hands dirty. So I'll create I'll say TCP dump. When I say TCP dump, I'll say give me dumps of TCP packets when the server is responding to me as a client from their servers and the port is 88. So what I'm trying to say is that what I've tried here is that there's going to be a TCP communication that will be generated between the client and the server. So in other words, there has to be some acknowledgements. TCP is connection oriented, so you first have to establish the connection. Once the connection has been established, then we can send our packets. We don't go too much into the SYN and the ARC and the FIN. We don't need that now. We are developers. We just need to understand what it does. So when the server is speaking to us, the client, when they are responding to us, let's actually see if we can see any data that will be coming out. So I want to see something. I want to have a look at something. So I want to be able to do some analysis based on that. So I'll do a TCP dump and I'll say the IP and then the port. But when the server is a source, not when I am the source. Alright, so if I go ahead and hit this, I need to also, sorry. If I go ahead and hit this, I'm now waiting, I'm listening. So I'm listening to receive packets. I'm listening to receive packets from the server. So what we're going to do is that we'll actually try and call our API. So we'll create another terminal with jump server. Let's just do a duplicate. Let's duplicate this. Duplicate. Okay, it's still connecting. That's fine. Let's duplicate this and let's call our API. So our API is TCP, and because it's a line server, I don't have access to something like push one. You can install one, but I don't know, that's not effective. And then we add the ports too. And go to the directory of the application. See that we want to access greetings. So greetings is the API I'm looking. Let's add a flag of verbose so we can actually see more details. So we are going to make our request. So if I make our request to this server for my host, I want to see TCP that will capture any packet of the server, respond to packets from that from that port you set. Okay, so it comes back and says connection refused. And then I'm going to check here TCP dump. This is the TCP dump. So it says that the source came back speaking to our host. We've already seen the host name, and it came back on this port for our host. It says that there was no data in it. The length of this is going to be what? 0. That's what I'm looking for, the length. I'm not really concerned about acknowledgement. The sequence was sequence of 0. In other words, we are now starting out. It's trying to get back to read the client of starting a sequence with us. So 0 and then acknowledgement. But I'm concerned about the length of what? 0. Which means that there was no data in my payload. So with this, I have enough evidence to share to maybe the Chinese partners that please check something on your server, because there was an ARC flag to it, which is okay because first a sync sent to from me was sent to partner, then partner acknowledges that alright, sure, I get it, you've reached out to me. But when I came back to when I'm coming back, there was no data, there was no payload. So I've sent you an ARC. So the connection itself hasn't fully been established per se. It's just we are now getting to it. So it's just okay to say that we will send it to partner. So the server, it turns out it could be that the server is off, the application is off, it hasn't been installed. So partner is just, we sent a sync, we sent an ARC, and we are now trying to establish a three-way handshake. So what's just important for us is that there was no payload there's no data in our payload. That's the length. So I'm just looking for the data. So I've seen what I wanted. So I'll just send this to partner, and I'll say go and do that. Check the service, because the TCP dump is not showing any packets of receiving any packets. So I'm not seeing any data. I'm not seeing any data at all. So that's the beginning of a conversation or some troubleshooting. Alright, So now we are going to act as a Chinese engineers and fix this. So to fix this, we're going to go to the remote server. We'll go to the remote server and we are going to actually check what the issue is. So to check what the issue is, we'll log into our remote server. Okay. Alright, so we are in our remote server. And the first thing we will do is let's actually see on this remote server if there are any form of active IP connections or TCP connections of that port. So the next tool we can use is netstat. When we do this and we go with ANO and we go with grep and check the port of 8080. So what have we just typed? Netstat is just trying to see all the active IP connections available on this host or this server. And there are some flags to it. You want to check all active IP connections. And we want to see encryptions attached to it. So you can check that in the man page, but because I've used it before, I just type it. So once I do that, I just type the grep and I'm trying to have it enter. This tells me that there is no net active IP connections for 8080. So if you are not confident, if you are still don't accept whether it's actually been giving information, let's do netstat of A to show you all the active IP connections. And instead of me scrolling up to go and search for it, I've added the grep to it and I've narrowed it to showing everything. Alright, so let's do it again. And so it gives you all the active IP connections on your machine. Cost of space. So we are not actually seeing what we want. Okay, so we are not seeing what we want. Let me do it again. The connections are 20. So there's a lot, that's why. So I have like I just went with the grep to prevent myself from scrolling up and down. So that was the essence of typing the short command of netstat. So there is no active IP connection. Let's check. Alright, so now let's check if the application server is up, because the application server has to be up before we can actually see the port is up. So let's do this. Status of Tomcat. Okay, so it says active, inactive. So let's turn it on. So see that. Come back and go back to status. Good. So now it's saying active. So active means that it's up now. So let's check. Once the web server, the app server is up, the application has to be running. If not for that, the application is showing the application on the server. So let's check and see if there's any active IP connections now. We've turned on our server. So go ahead and do. Let's start and grep at 8080. It's good, but it says what it's listening, which is perfect. At first, we're not seeing it at all. So this is a good way of actually analyzing something. So the Chinese people have analyzed and they've seen that okay, fine. 8080 is now listening, so it needs to be established. It needs to be connected. This and the protocol is TCP. Because it's TCP, you know that you have to have this SYN ARC then FIN. So the connectivity has to be established before. So if it's established, then we can send out data. So we are okay now. It's on. So if it's on, let's go back to our jam server and make up and do our further troubleshooting or testing. So because it's on now, let's just because the first way of checking is we started with tcpdump, so we can actually try again with tcpdump and see if this time around you capture data. And this is good. We had a response from the server, which is perfect. So the tcpdump also comes with the information of telling that this time around this was the first, we did this one initially, and we had another acknowledgement. So this the server communicates back to us on this port, and we had the length of was 1 point was HTTP and that's 200. So this is what we are looking for. So I said, how do I know this is what I'm looking for? That's because I know a little bit about this, so I know what to search out for. Yeah. So this is the status code, the length of data that was sent. I don't bother my head so much with Axe and Windows right now, but I know what I'm looking for. If this is a little bit ambiguous, you can actually go ahead and do this too. You can still listen, but you can add a flag to it, so it makes it more readable to you. -VB, and we'll hit it again. That's clear. Alright, then let's go back. And this is more perfect. So this actually tells you that this was the HTTP, and this is the length 290, and it comes back and gives you the response that you want to see. So this is more human readable as compared to the first one. So it's actually the first thing that we looked at, but it's been made verbose to you. So that's what I know what I'm looking for because I'm the one tracing the packets. Yeah, so you have to have some understanding of TCP/IP. So we get it and we say, yeah, we actually see our pack. So with this, we can actually communicate back to the Chinese partners that it has been successful because we're actually seeing packets. Yeah. Alright, so that's for TCP/dump. But one of the other ways of actually checking what is the update after a communication has come from the partner, you can actually do a telnet. And then we add the port. So telnet is actually saying that is it possible to have is it true that you can have an interactive connection to that server? In other words, you want to see that port has been open or our issue has been fixed. So we just do a telnet. Telnet is actually touching the application, but ping is touching the server as a whole. So when you do a telnet, it is connected. That's perfect to us because we've been able to establish to say that we have an open window to application on that port. So this is another way of doing that with telnet. So probably we didn't have gone with tcpdump, but after tcpdump we have done a telnet. Alright, so we've looked at, so that's for tcpdump and that's for telnet. So we looked at ping, looked at telnet, looked at traceroute, looked at ifconfig, we mentioned hostname, we mentioned nslookup, we looked at tcpdump, and not forgetting netstat. So these are some of the Swiss tools that you need, and all these are programs that are installed, so they have manuals to it. So based on maybe a use case, you may not want to ping forever, you want to ping and count for only 5 packets. So to ping and count for only 5 packets, you add a flag to do that. I'll show that in a chat. And also if you want to tcpdump, the other filtering you want to do when you are doing tcpdump to it, and if you also want to do a netstat, the other filtering tools that you want to do to it. So that's just for you to know. And before we go, I want to introduce one, nmap. Nmap is also a way of discovering hosts and services on your network. So why am I saying nmap? I'm saying nmap because if I had an issue of connection refused, and in that issue I wanted to check if it's a firewall or is there firewall has been allowed, is that port been allowed to receive communication to travel packets through a port, from the routers or going to the Chinese servers. You can do an nmap to see if there are open ports on your server. So if you do an nmap, it tells you if there are any open ports. So we'll do this one right on the Chinese server, not here. You can also do it here, but if you do it here, nmap, probably what you see you will not really appreciate. And I'll do it on the network ID. So how do I know the network ID? I'll get to that. So nmap -p and then sorry, network ID of 24. So let's give this a try. The port specification. Oh, so I have to add the port. I didn't add the port, sorry. So I'm going to scan for port 8080 on this server. Alright, so what I'm doing, I'm scanning for port 8080 on this server. And when it comes, it checks for the whole network because we have specified the network ID. So I know my IP address is 10. So that's the Chinese server that I'm saying is remote, but this is my server. So my server says that for my end is what is closed, you get it, but on the Chinese server is what is open, because we're on the same network. I explained that for demo purposes. On the same network, so it's closed on my end, so which means that connection refused. If I had connection refused on my end, probably I wouldn't have made good sense out of it. So that's why I went to just doing a tcpdump than an nmap. So on their end, they could have done an nmap to check if there are any open ports for that. But it doesn't spoil anything, because if you see connection refused and you didn't understand, you want to be sure if it's a firewall issue or not. If it's a firewall issue, then you would have gone ahead and done your debugging as firewall. But because it's not a firewall issue, you do not want to say that it's a firewall issue, so you're not going to go ahead and say it's a firewall issue. That's why we went to using tcpdump. So now I've allowed port 8080 is allowed, but is it open? So let's check and see. And it may not be open because I'm not running any application on this server. I haven't started any application. So let's check the status. It's still closed. It's still closed because my IP address is ifconfig and now .19. So I've opened it alright, but it's still not closed. So it's still not helping me in my work, but it's still informative. It's still like analysis. Yep. So I start the server here, then it becomes what open because the service is off. So we looked at telnet and we do that. So that's just for you to know about nmap. But if they did it on their end, and the other times you still need nmap, but for now that's not the case with us. So if let's switch off the server now. Let's stop. Right. And let's default to our initial issue. Let's say the API. Get connection refused. And let's come here and do an nmap -p TAT. And we do for this particular IP address, not for the whole network. So this IP address is 131. Yeah. So let's go ahead and scan. Or we don't have nmap installed here. So let's do that first. So aside using the netstat to do that, we also have to use nmap to see if there are any open ports or not. And the port becomes open when you turn on the server, so that the server says that we are on and the application is on, because the applications are being installed or they are residing in the app server. So that's just the understand. Yeah. So I try to just do a sudo update and install nmap and prevent all we want. Once that's done, go ahead and sudo install nmap. That means something. Apps install, sorry, sudo apps. Right. Next. So when this is done, then go ahead and do our final test. Which service would you like? Let's just okay. Once we go ahead and let's go. Alright, so we are here now. Then once we are here, just go ahead and do our nmap. Let's fetch our command nmap it. So this one says close, which is okay. Then let's run the game. Start. And still we are not seeing anything. But if we do turn the server on, start, and we do an nmap now, it says open. Alright, so the port has been open. Alright, so that's it for this code in regards to IP addresses and IP addresses. But looking beyond IP addresses, we are now actually going into command line tools. So go to the IP addresses, so we are going to now go to the command line tools. So we understood the IP address. Now let's look at some network command line tools. So that's it for this code film. And the last thing that, how did I find my network ID? You can just, because ifconfig won't show you anything, you don't see anything unless you can figure it out, which you can. But if not, you could just do IP routes. An IP route will tell you the gateway, default gateway, and the network ID for that. Yeah, so that's it for this code film. Alright, so we've looked at a lot of interesting stuff on this code film. So we're going to actually bring this session to a close. Then when this series is over, we look at other interesting stuff that we haven't yet touched on. Alright, so without much ado, I'll say thanks so much for sticking with us, and I'll drop the link to the videos as I've said earlier, so you can go ahead and have fun. And if you still want to have more information as to what to do with all these tools, you can actually just do the man of those tools, so man of tcpdump, and then you have more information as to what it does. Yep, you can go online and check. So there's the man page about using nmap, and you can do the man page for nmap too as well. Yeah, you can even find out where it has been installed on your Linux machine. That's those who want to get a little bit more geeky. Alright, so thank you so much for sticking with code films, and then I'll see you in another film. Bye.